So today we're going to be talking about this. Well, actually we're going to talk about Roth IRAs and traditional IRAs, but this is going to be helpful. Let's get moving forward. Welcome to the Plan Ranger, where our goal is to provide you with informed insights and a reasonable approach to managing your personal finances. Now, one of the questions that always emanates throughout the financial planning world is traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs, what's the difference? So we thought I'd take a few minutes today to give a 10,000 foot view of kind of the differences between these two types of accounts that you may or may not be able to use, but in most cases probably could use to save for your retirement. Now, while most people think, when they think of an IRA, and I've heard this any number of times from clients and people I've been talking to, is they'll say the phrase, I went and bought an IRA. So I bought an IRA or I did this. And they think of the IRA as the thing itself, right? Like they think the IRA is the investment. And that's just really not the case. IRAs are not investments in and of themselves. Rather, they're types of accounts that you can use for your investments. And so that's where this comes in. Hopefully this will be helpful to, help understand of what an IRA actually is. An IRA is more like a box than it is an investment itself. So think about your things like CDs, cash, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, and even some more alternative stuff can all be put inside of these boxes, right? Your IRA box. So what's this box do? This box basically defers taxation, okay? So both a Roth and traditional IRA alike, whatever you put inside of here, as it grows over time and as you buy and sell securities, you get dividends and interest payments. Anything that's inside this box is not going to be taxed by the IRS until you either take it out or beforehand when you put it in. But the key thing here is that what's happening inside this box basically goes unblemished or untouched by the IRS. As long as you follow the rules, of course. So an IRA, think about it as a box. All the investments and things you'd buy, you can put inside of this box to grow tax deferred. So while the box for the traditional IRA and the Roth IRA both provide that tax deferred growth, the difference between these boxes, actually has more to do with when taxation occurs when you make contributions or distributions. So let's look at a traditional IRA first. With a traditional IRA, when you put money into that account, you're not paying taxes on anything you put in there. So all the money goes in pre-tax. And when you're doing an IRA, what's going to happen is you're going to put in, let's say, $2,000. At the end of the year, when you file your taxes, you're going to deduct that $2,000 from your income so that you don't pay taxes on it. That's kind of how that works. Traditional IRAs, the money goes in pre-tax. With a Roth IRA, the money goes in after tax. So you will have already paid taxes on the money that goes into this box. Then your investments or whatever you have inside of here grows tax deferred. And when you take the money out, it's tax free. There should be no more taxes levied against that account. Asterisk next to all this, guys, because there's a lot of rules to these things. So sorry, I'm speaking in generalities here. But let's just say after age 59 and a half, there's even an asterisk next to that because anyways. We'll get into all the details in another video, but this is just a 10,000 foot overview here, guys, okay? So with a Roth IRA, you put the money in, you've already paid taxes on it, goes into here, grows, hopefully, and then comes out when you take your distributions, it's gonna come out tax-free. So traditional IRA, pre-tax, no taxes are paid when it goes in, you pay taxes when it comes out. Roth IRA, you pay the tax beforehand, put it in, no more taxes when you take distributions out at some point in the future. So those are our magical little boxes, okay? Wonderful, right? The fact that these boxes provide this tax-deferred growth can seriously help your account value grow faster over time. Taxes being levied on your account as you buy and sell things like a normal investment account, just a regular, non-qualified, that's the term for it, investment account. Those taxes, when you buy and sell things, they cause grind on the account and its growth. So the fact that you can grow these tax deferred is a big help to your future and to your retirement. But which one is better for you? And that's invariably the question always comes down to, which should I use? Should I use a Roth IRA or should I use a traditional IRA? Well, first of all, you can use both in all likelihood, unless your income passes certain limits. And there's income phase out limits for all this stuff for IRAs, but you could in theory use both. As of 2020, you can make a $6,000 contribution to an IRA. Now that can be, some of it goes into an IRA, a traditional IRA, and some of it could go into a Roth, or you could do all one or the other. If you're over age 50, you can also throw in an extra $1,000 as a catch-up contribution. So that's always possible too. But if you're under 50, as of 2020, the total IRA limit is $6,000, but you can choose how you divvy that up, again, within income limits here. Basically, if you're married, filing joint, if you make less than $200,000, it's a little more than that, but just simple terms, guys. $200K or less, you can do either Roth or traditional. If you make more than that, you're going to be limited to just a traditional. But even that has limits. Anyways, back to the point here. You can divvy it up between the two. But let's say you just want to do one or the other. Which is better? Which should you do? Which account you should save into actually depends on what you think is going to happen to you and to tax rates. Fundamentally, what we're talking about here is taxes and income. The more income you make, the higher your tax rate is. The lower your income rate, the lower your tax rate is. That's all part of a progressive tax in theory here. So now the other part is, what do you think will happen to tax rates? Do you think they're going to increase in the future, stay the same, or go down? Your income and taxes basically have, there's one of three directions that each of these things can go. They can go up, down, or sideways. They can stay the same. So what do you think is going to happen to your income? Is it going to increase in the future when you go to retire? Is it going to decrease, or is it going to stay about the same? If you're an attorney that's building a practice, at some point in the future, you might make vastly more than you are today. If you're a school teacher, your income might remain pretty stagnant over time, and your tax rate might as well. On the other hand, you might think, yeah, I'm a school teacher, but I even though my income's the same, I really think taxes are going to go up in the future. Those types of questions and your thoughts about what should happen there should inform your decision as far as should you go more the Roth direction, the traditional direction, or mixing and matching a little more. If you think that tax rates or your income are going to increase immensely, then, in the future, then you're probably better doing the Roth now, just because you wouldn't pay taxes in the future. That's when the higher rates would hit you, so you want to avoid that. So you'd be better off doing the Roth today. Conversely, if you thought, I think tax rates are going to keep going down. They've been going down pretty much since the 80s. And so I think that that's going to be the trend. And, I think taxes will be lower for me in retirement. In that case, you'd probably want to do the traditional, because if you do the traditional IRA, you're going to defer the taxes until a later point in time, at which case they might be lower for you. So if you think taxes or your income are going to go down, you want to go traditional. If you think taxes or your income are going to increase a lot, you probably want to lean more towards the Roth. And to kind of make that point, we've got a graph here that we can show you that kind of lays out the quick shot of, what should I do as far as Roth and traditional and the factors of taxes and income. Here's a graph that kind of illustrates that. As you can see, there's a split line down the middle where, you'd want to blend the two maybe a little bit more. But as you go more towards increasing income and increasing taxation, you want to go Roth. And as you go more towards decreasing, lower tax rates and lower income, you go more towards the traditional. Although, coming from the perspective of a financial planner, one of the best things ever is when a client shows up, 5-10 years before retirement, and you see that they've got diversification of tax money, right? And so we'll talk about what's called the tax triangle in another video here, but there are basically three types of money that you can have. You can have Roth Roth money, or after tax, no tax. You can have pre-tax, and then you can kind of have like your traditional ongoing tax, like a regular investment account. What's nice is to see diversification, because it allows a little more control over taxation in the future. Because when you show up to retire at some point, you might say, hey, look, in these first 5 years, 10 years, we really want to live it up. We're going to take a lot more money in these first 5-10 years, and then we're going to taper off our spending later. But we really want to travel. We want to take our family to, whatever you want to do. It allows more control over the tax scenario versus what I see frequently, and what most financial planners probably see a lot, is people show up to retire and they have everything possible almost in a 401k. It's great that they've saved. It's awesome. But from a tax perspective, there's really no control at this point. I mean, you're basically on a train and it's going to go this direction. The only money you can take is going to come out of a 401k or your IRA, and every dollar you take out is going to be taxed as ordinary income. So The ability to show up to retire with more than one type of money is really handy. So diversification is never a bad thing. Even if you do think taxes are going to go up a lot, or they're going to go down, or your income's going to go up, or your income's going to go down, it might still be a good idea to try and diversify your tax base a little bit so that you have more control over what happens in the future too. Now, just to clarify, when you do a couple housekeeping aspects, just so we're clear, there's a lot of details that go into IRAs and Roth and traditional, and depending on, what your age is, and are you employed? What's your compensation? Do you have a 401k? Do you have an employer-sponsored plan? There's a lot that goes into this. We are absolutely skipping past 10 different points here, which is kind of the norm for these videos if you haven't noticed. Personal finance is complicated. And this is one of those instances where, yes, there's rules, and I'm trying to give you a quick overview, but you need to be aware of the fact that there are any number of things that could affect you, that you shouldn't just take this as advice and go off and do one or the other. You need to familiarize yourself with the rules too, as far as these things go. One of the main rules is if you try and access the money from those boxes before you turn age 15 and a half, in general, you're going to pay a 10% penalty tax. Okay. Now it's a little different for Roth versus traditional and things like that. We'll, again, in another video, we'll talk about that. But just be aware that if you try and access the money beforehand, not only are you going to pay taxes, but you're going to pay a 10% penalty in addition to that. So don't use your IRA as a piggy bank. That's not what it's there for. Okay. It's there for long-term saving and investing for your future. Next, not everyone qualifies to use an IRA. There are certain things as far as do you have compensation? How old are you? There's always been a number of rules, and they've been kicked around back and forth as far as who can actually use IRAs. Most people can, to be fair. Most workers can use IRAs, just so you know. But there are some exceptions to that, and you just want to make sure you don't fall into that trap, okay? And then finally, just a quick thought here. If your employer offers a retirement plan, like a 401k or a simple IRA or something, if they offer anything that has a match, you want to use that first. And this is always kind of another question that people, well, should I do an IRA or should I do my 401k? I like IRAs a lot just because you have control over where the investments are. You can take an IRA and invest it pretty much anywhere, any brokerage firm, and you're going to have a much wider array of investment options that you can use. But if you have a match coming from your employer, you want to get that match. It's free money. So get that match first, and then, once you've maxed out your match, you can go on to other things like doing an IRA or a Roth or something like that. But for sure, you want to use your employer plan first. So look, that's all we have for today. I'll go ahead and put a pin in it there. Like I said, we're going to talk about the details of IRAs in a later video, but I just want to give an overview to answer kind of that question that I get all the time, which is Roth versus traditional, which is better, which should I use? Hopefully this helps you to ask yourself the right questions about what's going to be the best fit for you. If you have any other questions, please feel free to leave them down in the comments down below. Love to answer your questions. Go ahead and click the subscribe button, join the Plan Ranger community. We'd love to have you as a member of it. And until next time, thanks for taking the time, guys. Hope this helped.